when my husband told me I'm moving back in with my ex-wife to take care of her. You'll understand someday, I smiled and said, of course. I even packed his bags and drove him to her house. What I discreetly slipped into her mailbox had him coming home empty-handed in less than 48 hours. I'm moving back in with Chloe to take care of her during her recovery. You'll understand someday. Gabe dropped these words while I was sipping my Tuesday night chamomile tea, forcing me to set the mug down on the table with deliberate control instead of launching it at his head. 5 years of marriage, and he chose to detonate our life together with the casual tone of someone announcing they were switching grocery stores. I studied his face, the way he constantly adjusted his reading glasses, the nervous twist of his wedding band, the careful distance he kept from me across our kitchen island. Of course, I heard myself say, in a voice so sweet it made him take a step back, "When do you need to leave?" His relief was instant and insulting. He'd expected tears, accusations, maybe even the ceramic mug flying past his ear. Instead, my quiet acceptance completely unnerved him. Tomorrow afternoon, he managed, his fingers still fiddling with that ring. Her surgery is Thursday at 7 a.m. I nodded, taking another sip of tea. Suddenly, the kitchen felt smaller, the walls pressing in despite the open concept design we fell in love with when we bought the house 3 years ago. In this very spot, Gabe had wrapped his arms around me, whispering about the children we'd raise here, the dinner parties we'd host, the life we'd build together. Now he stood on the other side of the granite countertop as if it were a fortress wall. "How long has Chloe been planning this surgery?" I asked conversationally. "A couple of months. It's complicated. Something about nerve damage from her car accident last year." He was more comfortable with the topic, now likely grateful I was engaging instead of exploding. "She's tried to manage with physical therapy, but the doctors finally said surgery was the only option. 2 months. While I was planning our anniversary trip to Napa Valley, he had been planning his exodus. The reservation confirmations were still in my inbox, the wine tour already paid for, scheduled for 3 weeks from now. I wondered if he'd forgotten or if he simply hadn't cared enough to remember. "And she doesn't have anyone else?" I asked, genuinely curious about this part of his narrative. Chloe Anderson was hardly a hermit. Her Facebook profile, which I had definitely not been stalking, showed regular girls' nights, family barbecues, and a particularly close relationship with her sister. Her parents moved to Florida last year, and she and her sister aren't on speaking terms. There was the lie sliding out as smooth as butter. Just last week, Chloe had posted pictures from her sister's birthday dinner. I'm the only one she feels comfortable asking for help. She needs intimate care. Intimate care. The phrase hung in the air between us like a confession. I could see him realize what he'd said, the flush creeping up his neck as he rushed to clarify. Medical care helping her shower, changing bandages, that sort of thing. "How lucky that you're available to help," I said, getting up to rinse my mug in the sink. Through the window, I saw our neighbor, Mrs. Gable, walking her ancient poodle, keeping to her strict 7:30 schedule. The normalcy of the scene felt surreal. "Will you be staying in the guest room?" Gabe's silence lasted a beat too long. "She's converted her downstairs office into a recovery room so she won't have to navigate stairs." So thoughtful of her. Planning so far ahead. I turned off the faucet, drying my hands on the dish towel with deliberate care. 2 months, you said. He must have heard something in my tone because his shoulders tensed. "Caroline, this isn't... I'm not leaving you. This is temporary. Just until she's back on her feet." "Of course it is." I folded the towel and hung it perfectly straight on the oven handle. "And how long do the doctors expect her recovery to take?" 6 weeks, maybe 8, depending on complications. 8 weeks of my husband living with his ex-wife, providing intimate care. Being her hero. I turned to face him, fully leaning against the counter. "You really have thought of everything." I had to. I knew this would be hard for you to understand, but Caroline, she was my wife for 8 years. We may not have worked out, but I can't just abandon her when she needs help. There was that word again, abandon. As if not moving in with your ex-wife constituted abandonment. As if staying with your current wife was somehow the morally inferior option. "You're right," I said, and his eyes widened in surprise. "I understand. You made a commitment and you need to see it through." Gabe's relief was almost comical. He actually smiled, this boyish grin that had charmed me in a coffee shop 6 years ago. "I knew you'd come around. You're amazing, Caroline. Not many women would be this understanding." I smiled back, already mentally cataloging the contents of his office, the passwords he kept on. Post-it notes despite my warnings about security. The file cabinet where he thought I didn't know. He kept old pictures of Chloe. "Well then, we should get you packed. You'll want to arrive organized." "You don't have to help," he said quickly. "I know this is weird." Nonsense. What kind of wife would I be if I didn't help my husband? When he needed it, I moved past him toward the hall. I'll get your suitcase from the closet. You should probably call Chloe and let her know when she can expect you. As I walked up the stairs to our bedroom, I heard him behind me, his voice already adopting those soft, intimate tones. Hey, Chloe. Yeah, I just told her. She's being amazing. Incredible. That was one way to describe what I was being. Entering our bedroom, I pulled his large suitcase from the closet, the one we bought for our honeymoon in Costa Rica. Inside, the luggage tag from that trip was still there. Mr. and Mrs. Gabe Sullivan, it read. Forever starts today. Forever had lasted exactly 5 years, 2 months, and 16 days. The suitcase lay open on our bed, like a mouth waiting to swallow the last 5 years of my life. I heard the shower start in the master bath. Gabe's off-key humming of some old rock song filtering through the door. He always hummed when he felt guilty, a tell he never knew he had. I folded another shirt with the crisp corners my mother taught me and placed it in the suitcase next to the others. His laptop was open on his nightstand, the screen dark but not locked. Gabe never remembered to lock it despite my constant reminders about digital security. The shower was still running hard. He took long showers, especially when he needed to think, which meant I had at least 10 minutes. I walked around the bed and touched the trackpad. The screen flickered to life, revealing his email inbox. At the top was a thread with Chloe Anderson that went back 2 months. 2 months of planning this moment while I slept beside him every night, oblivious. The subject line read, Post-op preparations, innocent enough for anyone looking over his shoulder. I clicked it open. The last message from Chloe, sent at 11:43 p.m. last night while I was asleep after yoga, made my stomach churn. Can't wait to have you here again, Gabe. I feel like we're finally getting our second chance. Once you're moved in, we can really see where this goes. Gabe's reply, sent at 11:51 p.m. from the bathroom while I slept in the next room. Caroline won't put up a fight if we frame it right. She's too polite to look unsupportive of someone who's sick. Trust me on this. Too polite. After 5 years of marriage, that's how he saw me. Not kind, not understanding, not loving. Polite. As if I were a stranger who would hold the door rather than let it slam in someone's face. I scrolled further back. March 15th. Chloe wrote, The doctor says I can schedule the surgery anytime after May. Should we wait until after your anniversary? Gabe's reply, No, the sooner the better. Caroline always gets sentimental around our anniversary. Better to do it when she's distracted with work. They had scheduled the breaking of my heart around my busy season at the marketing agency, like a dentist appointment wedged between meetings. I heard the water pressure change in the shower, a sign Gabe was almost finished. I closed the email, making sure to mark it as unread, and went back to folding clothes. When Gabe emerged with a towel around his waist, hair dripping, he found me arranging his prescription bottles in a travel toiletry bag. You don't have to do this, he said. But his voice was relieved, not protesting. Scrambled eggs or an omelet, I asked without looking up from the pills I was sorting. For breakfast, I mean. You'll need a good meal before the drive. Caroline. He sat on the edge of the bed, water drops from his hair hitting the duvet. An omelet. With that spicy cheese, you know, I zipped the bag closed. I'll get it started while you get dressed. In the kitchen, I moved with expert efficiency. Eggs whisked with a splash of cream, just how Gabe liked them. Sourdough bread in the toaster butter, softening on the counter, coffee brewing strong and black. Each movement was automatic, leaving my mind free to process what I had read. 2 months, 8 weeks of careful planning, of synchronized deceit. I thought of all the times he'd worked late the weekend conferences that now seemed suspiciously frequent, the way he'd been extra attentive lately, guilt masquerading as affection. The doorbell rang as I was plating the eggs. Through the kitchen window, I saw Megan's red Honda Civic in the driveway. My best friend since college had an instinct for disaster, like animals sensing an earthquake. Just wanted to drop off this book, Megan announced when I opened the door, though we both knew she'd never mentioned any book. Her eyes took in my forced smile, the sounds of Gabe moving around upstairs, the suitcase visible through the bedroom door. Caroline, what's going on? Gabe's going to help Chloe with her surgery recovery, I said, my voice as bright as the morning sun. Isn't that wonderful of him? Megan's face went through several expressions before settling on disbelief. She worked as a surgical nurse at the same hospital where Chloe was having her procedure. Breast augmentation. The words landed in my kitchen like grenades, but I just kept whisking eggs. He said it was nerve damage from a car accident. Caroline, Megan lowered her voice. I saw the OR schedule. It's an elective cosmetic surgery. She's been planning it for months. How considerate scheduling everything so carefully, I said, adding salt to the eggs with a steady hand. Megan just stared at me. We'd known each other for 12 years through bad boyfriends and worse decisions through her divorce and my father's death. She knew my faces, all of them, including this one, the calm before I burned it all down. Do you want me to stay? She asked quietly. No need. Gabe needs a good breakfast before his mission of mercy. I poured the eggs into the hot pan, the sizzle filling the silence. After Megan left, squeezing my hand tight and whispering, "Call me," I served Gabe his breakfast. He ate quickly, nervously complimenting the eggs twice, as if that could absolve his guilt. I sipped my coffee and made the appropriate assenting noises, as he explained again how temporary this arrangement would be. I should just check the joint account, he said suddenly, pulling out his phone, make sure there's enough for groceries while I'm gone. I watched him navigate our banking app. I saw his face remain carefully neutral as he looked at the balance. He didn't mention the $35,000 that had vanished over the past 2 years, the monthly transfers to an insurance company. I'd never heard of the large withdrawal-labeled property consultation just 6 weeks ago. He simply closed the app and kept eating. I'll handle the bills while you're away, I offered, refilling his coffee mug. You're incredible, he said again, that word that was starting to sound more like an accusation than a compliment. I don't deserve you. Finally, something we could agree on. I smiled and started clearing the plates, every movement, deliberate and calm. Inside, meanwhile, the pieces of my world were rearranging themselves into a pattern I was only beginning to comprehend. The missing money, the secret planning. The surgery that wasn't what it seemed, the threads of deceit were weaving into something bigger than a simple affair. We should finish packing, I said, drying my hands on the dish towel. Chloe will be waiting. Back upstairs, Gabe had ducked into his office to make calls, his voice, a low murmur through the closed door. I was in our bedroom surveying the chaos of the suitcase ahead of me. His clothes hung in the closet like witnesses to our crumbling marriage. Each shirt and tie holding memories I needed to pack away. I pulled out his summer clothes first, the linen pants he'd worn on our trip to Charleston last month, the polo shirts from golf outings with clients, each piece folded with the precision of someone who'd worked retail in college, creases sharp enough to cut. Gabe emerged from his office an hour later, to find me surrounded by perfectly organized piles, his dress shirts arranged by color gradient, his casual wear by function, each stack looking like a department store display. You're really going all out, he said, and I heard the discomfort creep into his voice. If you're going to be a caregiver, you have to be organized, I replied, holding up a label maker I'd found in the closet. I'm labeling everything so you can find what you need quickly. Morning wear, casual afternoon pajamas. Each label was printed with unnecessary precision, the kind of detail that suggested either obsessive care or barely contained rage. Caroline, this is... He trailed off, watching me fold his boxer briefs into perfect squares. You really don't need to do all this. I've also started on meals, I continued as if he hadn't spoken. I'm making containers for 2 weeks. Chloe shouldn't have to cook while she recovers. And you've never been much of a cook. The jab slid in smoothly, wrapped in concern. I've made chicken noodle soup. That lasagna you love. And I'm working on a special healing tea blend with ginger and turmeric. Gabe's face went through several expressions before settling on something close to fear. A tea. For Chloe's recovery, anti-inflammatory properties. I smiled brightly. I'll put it in a nice jar with instructions. She'll appreciate the gesture. He retreated back into his office and I heard him on the phone, his voice low but urgent. She's not just being helpful. She's being too helpful. It's weird. A pause. I don't know what to think. While he was distracted, I slipped into his office. The filing cabinet in the corner had always been locked, Gabe's private space for what he called important documents. What he didn't know was that I'd made a copy of the key years ago after he lost the original and asked me to order a replacement. 2 keys arrived. I gave him one. The bottom drawer slid open silently. Behind tax returns from 3 years ago, behind old warranties and instruction manuals, my fingers found a folder that felt different, newer. The papers inside were crisp, recently handled. I pulled it out carefully, listening for Gabe's footsteps. The first document made my breath catch for a moment. A life insurance policy in Chloe Anderson's name, dated 2 years ago. For $500,000. Gabe was listed as the sole beneficiary. The premium payments, I noted with cold clarity, matched those mysterious insurance company charges on our joint account. He had been paying for this with our money planning for something I couldn't yet fully grasp. But the second document made it all crystal clear. A quitclaim deed signed 6 weeks ago, transferring partial ownership of Chloe's townhouse to Gabe, the very townhouse he was moving into today. The document cited in consideration for future care and support as the reason for the transfer. 6 weeks ago, we had been celebrating our anniversary at that overpriced French restaurant downtown, Gabe holding my hand across the table talking about our future. My phone's camera captured it all. Every page, every signature, every date. The payment history on the insurance policy, the notary's stamp on the deed, the witness's signature that looked suspiciously like that of Ryan Gabe's colleague. 23 photos in total, each one proof of a betrayal that went far beyond a simple affair. I heard Gabe's footsteps in the hall and quickly returned everything exactly as I'd found it. The folder went back behind the tax returns. The drawer was locked and I was examining his bookshelf when he opened the door. Looking for something, his voice had an edge of suspicion. "That medical reference book you bought last year," I said, running a finger along the spines. "Thought it might be helpful for understanding Chloe's recovery needs." He relaxed visibly. "It's in the garage, I think." "But really, the doctor will give us all the information." "Of course." I moved past him toward the door. "I should check on the soup." Downstairs, I ladled the freshly made chicken noodle soup into containers, each one labeled with heating instructions in my best script. My phone buzzed my mother, calling with her usual impeccable timing. I answered with forced cheerfulness. "Hi, Mom." "Caroline, something's wrong. I can feel it." 30 years of maternal instinct compressed into one call. "Everything's fine. In fact, Gabe is doing something truly noble." I let admiration seep into my voice. His ex-wife Chloe needs help after a surgery, and he's offered to be her caregiver. Isn't that wonderful? The silence on the other end of the line stretched for 3 full seconds. He's moving in temporarily to help her with her recovery. It's what any decent person would do. I knew my mother would be on the phone with her book club within minutes. The news would spread through our social circle like wildfire. Gabe's noble gesture would be discussed over wine and judgment before he even arrived at Chloe's house. "Caroline Marie," my mother's voice dropped to her serious tone, the one she used when she caught me sneaking out in high school. "What are you playing at?" "I'm supporting my husband's decision to help someone in need," I replied, adding another container of soup to the growing collection. "Wouldn't you do the same for Dad?" She made a sound that could have meant anything. "Call me if you need me." "Of course, Mom. Give Dad a kiss for me." I hung up and returned to the meal prep. Lasagna assembled with layers as precise as my folded clothes. Vegetable curry portioned into single servings. Everything Gabe would need for 2 weeks of domestic comfort while he played house with another woman. The tea blend was last. Chamomile for calm, ginger for inflammation, powdered honey for sweetness, and just a touch of lavender for sleep. Nothing harmful, nothing that could hurt anyone, just a gentle remedy packaged in a glass jar with a hand-painted label for healing and new beginnings. Gabe found me arranging it all in a cooler with ice packs. "This is too much," he said, but his protest sounded hollow. "It's exactly enough," I corrected, snapping the cooler shut with a decisive click. "There. All ready for tomorrow." Wednesday morning arrived with a mocking sunshine that streamed through our bedroom windows. Gabe was already awake, sitting on the edge of the bed in his freshly pressed khakis and the blue button-down shirt I'd ironed the night before. The same shirt he'd worn to his first dinner with my parents 4 years ago. Now he was wearing it to move in with another woman. "Coffee?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Gabe needed his morning coffee like other people needed oxygen. 2 sugars, a splash of milk served in the Yankees mug his brother had given him. In the kitchen, I performed the coffee ritual with mechanical precision, while Gabe loaded his suitcases by the front door. The cooler of prepped meals sat ready on the counter, the glass jar of healing tea resting on top like the crown jewel of martyrdom. I heard him grunt slightly as he lifted his suitcase, the one filled with clothes I had folded as if preparing a soldier for war. "My car's still in the shop," Gabe announced when I handed him his coffee, though we both knew I'd seen it parked at his office yesterday when I drove by. "Would you mind giving me a ride?" The lie floated between us, obvious and insulting, but I smiled. "Of course. We should probably take the cooler too. It's all ready to go." During the 20-minute drive to Chloe's townhouse, Gabe transformed with every mile that separated us from our home. His shoulders relaxed, his breathing deepened, his fingers stopped, their nervous tapping on his knee. By the time we hit the highway, he was even humming again that same guilty tune from the shower yesterday. "This is very modern of us," he said as we passed the downtown exit. "Most people wouldn't understand this kind of arrangement." "We're not most people," I replied, keeping my eyes on the road while memorizing every detail of his relief. The way he kept glancing at his phone, likely texts from Chloe. the slight smile that played at the corners of his mouth. The wedding ring he had switched to his right hand at some point this morning, thinking I wouldn't notice. Chloe's subdivision appeared like a mirage of mediocrity, endless rows of beige and gray, siding with tiny, regulated plots of lawn. Her house was at the end of Rosewood Lane, a name that suggested an elegance the neighborhood couldn't deliver. I pulled into her driveway behind a BMW that definitely wasn't there during the supposed financial hardships she'd complained about on Facebook last year. Before Gabe could even unbuckle his seatbelt, the front door swung open. Chloe appeared on the threshold as if she'd been waiting at the window watching for our arrival. She wore champagne-colored silk pajamas, her blonde hair perfectly waved, her face fully made up with the kind of careful application that takes an hour minimum. For someone recovering from surgery, she looked remarkable, like someone on their way to a high-end brunch. Gabe, her voice carried across the small yard with a rehearsed weakness. I was starting to worry. She moved toward us with careful steps, one hand pressed to her side in a gesture of pain that didn't quite match the fluidity of her walk. Gabe practically jumped from the car to meet her, his hands hovering near her elbows as if she might collapse at any moment. "Careful," he murmured, and I watched Chloe lean into him with a calculated fragility. "Caroline." Chloe finally addressed me, her green eyes scanning me with the kind of appraisal women reserve for their rivals. "You're an angel for being so understanding. Not many wives would be so evolved." I pulled the cooler from the back seat, my movements deliberately cheerful. "We all do what we have to do. Gabe tells me your recovery might be a challenge." "Oh, it's been awful," Chloe sighed, though her breathing showed no signs of post-operative distress. "The pain is unbearable at times. I can barely manage on my own." As we went inside, I cataloged everything. The wheelchair placed prominently in the living room, but with no signs of use, its price tag hastily removed but leaving adhesive residue. Prescription bottles arranged on the coffee table like props. Labels facing out for maximum visibility. Fresh flowers in every room, the kind of expensive arrangements that suggested visitors were expected. The entire surgery recovery setup was as staged as a furniture store showroom. "Let me help with the bags," I offered, following Gabe back to the car while Chloe arranged herself decoratively on the couch. "She seems to be managing well for someone fresh out of surgery," I commented softly, lifting his laptop bag. Gabe's jaw tightened. "Recovery affects everyone differently." Inside, Chloe had moved to the kitchen, her hand finding Gabe's arm with the practiced ease of long-standing intimacy. "I've missed having someone here," she said, her fingers tracing his sleeve. "The nights are the hardest." "Well, you've got help now," I said, brightly placing the cooler on her granite countertop. "I've packed meals for 2 weeks. And this," I held up, the glass jar, "is a special healing tea blend. Ginger, turmeric, chamomile. Very soothing." Chloe's smile tightened at the edges. "Well, I should be going," I announced after helping arrange Gabe's things in what Chloe called the guest room, but had clearly been recently redecorated with new bedding and fresh paint. "Thanks for everything," as Gabe said as he walked me to the door, his relief at my departure palpable. "I'll call you later," he said, the lie comfortable on his lips. "Take all the time you need," I replied, loud enough for Chloe to hear. I drove 2 blocks to a small coffee shop I'd spotted on the way in. The afternoon crowd hadn't yet arrived, giving me privacy in a corner booth with my laptop and the folder I'd stashed in my bag. Every photograph from yesterday was transferred to a new email account backed up to a cloud service. Evidence preserved in triplicate. Next, I pulled out the manila envelope I'd purchased that morning. Inside, I slipped printed copies of everything. The life insurance policy, with the payment records highlighted. The property deed with a post-it note that read, "Interesting timing, deed transfer 6 weeks before an elective surgery." Screenshots of their planning emails with Gabe's cruel assessment of my politeness highlighted in yellow. But the masterpiece was Chloe's own Instagram. 3 days before her supposed emergency surgery, she had posted pictures from a wine-tasting trip in Sonoma. Her beaming smile and the glass of red in her hand did not suggest someone preparing for an urgent medical intervention. I printed those too, adding another note, "Remarkable recovery since that wine tasting." The final piece of my package was the handwritten note on cream-colored stationery I'd bought specifically for this moment. My handwriting, deliberately altered to be unrecognizable, spelled out Chloe's future with surgical precision. "Chloe, you should know Gabe took out a $500,000 life insurance policy in your name 2 years ago, paid for with community property assets. Combined with the property deed transfer, this creates an interesting financial picture. Perhaps you should ask yourself why a healthy woman needs a live-in caregiver who stands to benefit from her death. Consult with your attorney about property deeds signed under medical duress. Duress voids contracts. Best wishes for your recovery, a concerned observer. I sealed the envelope, wrote Chloe's name on the front, and left the coffee shop. The walk back to her neighborhood took 15 minutes, enough time for the afternoon to fade into early evening. Dog walkers and joggers provided the perfect cover as I strolled past manicured lawns and identical mailboxes. Chloe's was at the end of her driveway, black metal with a red flag, waiting to announce incoming mail. I slid the envelope inside, feeling the satisfying weight as it settled among her regular correspondence. Then I just kept walking as if I belonged there, just another resident, enjoying the evening air. The drive home felt like floating. Every traffic light seemed to understand my mood, turning green as I approached. Back in my empty house, the silence greeted me like an old friend. No hum of the TV from Gabe's study, no sound of his typing, no throat clearing when he wanted attention but wouldn't ask for it directly. Just blessed quiet. I poured myself a glass of Cabernet from the bottle Gabe had been saving for a special occasion and stood in my kitchen surveying the space he had always criticized. Too cluttered, he'd say. Too many gadgets we never use. But tonight I saw it differently. Every appliance had its place. Every spice jar faced forward, the counters clear and clean. This was my space, organized exactly as I wanted it. The wine tasted better than it ever had shared with Gabe. I reorganized the pantry as I sipped, moving his protein bars to the highest shelf, bringing my herbal teas front and center. His breakfast cereal went to the back. My granola took pride of position. Small acts of reclamation that felt like a revolution. My phone sat on the counter, face-up, volume on high. Chloe always checked her mail first thing in the morning. She'd posted about it once, calling it her pre-coffee morning ritual. 7:30 a.m. Like clockwork. According to the timestamps on her posts, complaining about bills and political flyers. In approximately 13 hours, she would find my envelope. The thought made me smile into my wine glass. That night, I slept in the center of our king-sized bed, spread out like a starfish, reclaiming every inch of space Gabe had once occupied. No snoring from his side, no restless tossing, no alarm set for his absurdly early workout routine that he'd maintained for exactly 3 weeks before abandoning. The sheets smelled only of my lavender fabric softener, his cologne already fading like a ghost giving up its haunting. Thursday morning arrived with birdsong outside my window. 6:30 a.m. I stretched luxuriously, taking my time with morning yoga in the living room where Gabe always complained my mat was in the way. Warrior pose felt particularly appropriate as I held it, breathing deeply, centering myself for what was to come. Breakfast was simple. Greek yogurt with honey and walnuts. Green tea in my favorite mug, the delicate one with painted roses that Gabe said looked like it belonged to a grandmother. I checked work emails. I replied to a client about a marketing proposal. I scheduled a meeting for next week. Normal activities that felt surreal given what was brewing 3 miles away in Chloe's mailbox. 7:30 a.m. Came and went. My phone remained silent. 7:48. Either Chloe had slept in, breaking her routine, or she was processing what she'd found. I pictured her standing in her driveway, envelope in hand, reading and rereading the note. The dawning realization that Gabe might not be the savior she had orchestrated. At 8:17 a.m., my phone buzzed. It wasn't Gabe, but my sister Laura. Her timing uncanny as always. "You are not going to believe what I just heard," she said without preamble. Laura lived for gossip the way other people lived for oxygen. "Good morning to you too," I replied, refilling my tea. "Chloe Anderson has been bragging to the book club for weeks that she was getting Gabe back," Laura continued, her voice tinged with the excitement of someone breaking a news story. "Sophia, you remember Sophia, Chloe's sister? She's been telling everyone how Chloe planned the whole thing. The surgery, the timing, everything." I set my mug down carefully. "Sophia is in your book club, started last month. She's been dying to vent about Chloe. Apparently, Chloe researched when your busy season at work was, timed the surgery for maximum impact. She even rehearsed her helpless act in the mirror, according to Sophia. Confirmation of what I had suspected should have stung, but instead it felt like validation. Every instinct I'd had was correct." "That's quite elaborate," I said softly. "Caroline, she's been planning this for over a year." "Sophia said Chloe hired a private investigator to track Gabe's routines. Learned about your marital problems." "We didn't have marital problems," I cut in. Laura paused. "No. Not until yesterday. The silence stretched between us before Laura spoke again, her voice softer. What are you going to do? I'm going to finish my tea and work on the Henderson account, I replied. By the way, I have a video call with my lawyer in 20 minutes. Your lawyer, Caroline, you didn't waste any time. Why would I? Gabe made his choice. I'm simply responding accordingly. After Laura hung up, I prepared for my video consultation with Catherine Bennett, the lawyer Megan had recommended last year during her own divorce. Catherine's face appeared on my laptop screen at exactly 9 a.m. Her expression professional but warm. Caroline, I've reviewed the documents you sent over. It's quite a comprehensive collection. I'd emailed her everything the night before. The insurance policy, the property deed, the bank statements showing the missing $35,000, the screenshots of the planning emails between Gabe and Chloe. Your husband's actions constitute community property fraud, Catherine continued, her fingers steepled as she spoke. Using joint funds for the insurance policy, the property consultation, hiding assets, this all gives you significant leverage. The property deed transfer alone raises questions of undue influence and financial manipulation. What does that mean practically? I asked, taking notes on a legal pad. It means Gabe has violated his fiduciary duty to you as his spouse. The court looks very unfavorably on spouses who dissipate community assets, especially when there's deception involved. You're entitled to a full accounting and likely a larger share of the remaining assets as compensation. And if he tries to claim this is temporary, that he's coming back. Catherine's smile was as sharp as a razor. Abandonment is abandonment, regardless of his stated intentions. Catherine was explaining the details of asset division when my phone rang at exactly 1147 a.m. Gabe's name on the screen made my pulse quicken, though I kept my expression neutral for the video call. I need to take this, I told Catherine. It's him. Document everything she advised before I switched the call. Gabe's voice came through high and tight, nothing like the confident man who had walked out of my house yesterday morning. Caroline, I need to come home. Can you come get me? I stood from my desk, moving toward the window where the morning light filtered through the blinds. What happened? Is Chloe okay? She's lost her mind. She kicked me out. She won't let me back in. My bags are on the lawn. She's threatening to call the police. His words tumbled over each other, the panic making him sound decades younger than his 35 years. She found some documents. She thinks I'm trying to. It's insane. She thinks I'm after her money. The satisfaction that bloomed in my chest was dark and complete, though my voice remained steady. The police. Gabe. What kind of documents would make her think that I don't know? The edge of hysteria in his voice was new. In 5 years of marriage, I had never heard him sound so unraveled. Something about insurance and a property deed. She's completely paranoid. The pain medication must be affecting her judgment. I picked up my car keys, already moving toward the door. I'm on my way. Try to stay calm. Please, just hurry. The neighbors are watching. The drive to Chloe's took 18 minutes, though I could have made it in 12. Each red light gave me time to compose my face into the appropriate expression of concern mixed with confusion. By the time I turned onto Rosewood Lane, I had achieved the perfect balance of the supportive wife rushing to her troubled husband's rescue. The scene that greeted me was better than anything I could have imagined. Gabe was sitting on his suitcases at the end of Chloe's driveway, shoulders slumped, looking for all the world like a piece of lost luggage no one wanted to claim. His perfectly ironed shirt from yesterday was wrinkled, his hair disheveled as if he'd run his hands through it repeatedly. 2 neighbors were in their driveways pretending to check their mail, while obviously reveling in the drama. Through Chloe's front window, I could see her pacing phone pressed to her ear, gesticulating wildly with her free hand. Even from the car, her agitation was visible in every movement. Yesterday's silk pajamas had been replaced with street clothes, the invalid act apparently forgotten in her fury. I parked and approached Gabe with measured steps, aware of our audience. "Oh, Gabe," I said, loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "What on earth happened?" He shot to his feet, nearly tripping over his own bags. She went crazy. 1 minute she was fine, the next she's screaming about fraud and throwing my stuff outside. His eyes darted to the window where Chloe had stopped pacing to glare out at us. "We have to go. Now." I picked up one of his bags, noting how he flinched when Chloe's front door opened a crack, then slammed shut again. "Of course. Let's get your things in the car." We loaded his belongings quickly. The same bags I had helped him pack with such precision, now tossed haphazardly into my trunk. Gabe kept looking back at the house as if he expected Chloe to come storming out at any moment. His hands were shaking as he closed the trunk. She was fine last night, he said, as we pulled away Chloe's townhouse shrinking in the rearview mirror. We had dinner, watched a movie, everything was normal. Then this morning she got the mail and she just exploded. I merged onto the main road, keeping my voice soft. The mail. She found something in her mailbox. Documents about insurance policies and property deeds. She accused me of trying to steal from her, of plotting to hurt her for money. His voice broke on the last few words. Caroline, I would never. You know I would never do that. Of course not, I soothed, signaling for a turn. It sounds like the pain medication is making her paranoid. Some people have terrible reactions to those drugs. She's probably not thinking clearly. Gabe latched onto this explanation with desperate relief. That has to be it. The meds. She was taking a lot of pills yesterday. He rubbed his face with both hands. But she called me a con artist. Said I was after her money. Where would she even get an idea like that? Who knows what goes through someone's mind when they're not well? I offered, maintaining a steady speed through our neighborhood. Maybe she'll calm down once the medication wears off. She's not taking my calls. I tried to explain, but she just kept screaming about lawyers and fraud charges. He slumped in the passenger seat, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. This was supposed to be about helping her recover. How did it turn into this? I pulled into our driveway, and the familiar sight of our house seemed to startle Gabe as if he'd forgotten this was technically still his home. We sat in the car for a moment, the engine ticking as it cooled. Maybe she just needs time, I suggested. Surgery can be traumatic. People aren't themselves afterward. Gabe nodded eagerly, clinging to any rational explanation that didn't involve examining his own actions. You're right. She needs time. Once she's thinking clearly, she'll realize this is all a misunderstanding. As we unloaded his bags, Mrs. Jenkins appeared with her elderly cocker spaniel buddy, timing her walk perfectly to intersect with our arrival. Mrs. Jenkins had lived on our street for 30 years and possessed an intelligence network that would make the FBI envious. Caroline Gabe, she called her voice, carrying that particular tone of feigned surprise while delivering gossip. I heard there was quite a commotion over at the Anderson place this morning. Gabe stiffened beside me, but I touched his arm gently. Mrs. Jenkins, how are you? And Buddy, oh, we're fine, dear. Though I must say there was a lot of shouting this morning. Something about a domestic dispute on Rosewood Lane. Her eyes gleamed with barely contained excitement. The whole neighborhood heard the yelling, something about fraud and theft. That poor woman was beside herself. Gabe's face turned a deep shade of red. It was a misunderstanding. Of course, Mrs. Jenkins nodded, though her expression suggested she was already composing the story she'd share at the neighborhood coffee clatch tomorrow. These things happen, though I must say fraud accusations are quite serious. The police seemed very interested. We should get inside, I said to Mrs. Jenkins, gesturing to Gabe's bags scattered across our driveway. It's been a long morning. She nodded, knowingly tugging on Buddy's leash. Of course, dear. You two take care. Her parting glance at Gabe suggested she'd already convicted him in the court of neighborhood opinion. Gabe shuffled inside behind me, dragging his suitcase as if it weighed a ton. He went straight for our bedroom muscle memory, guiding him upstairs while I stayed in the kitchen, counting the minutes until he discovered the changes I'd made. 3 minutes. That's how long it took before I heard his footsteps returning heavier now, almost stumbling. He appeared in the kitchen doorway, his face pale. My clothes. They're not in the closet. They're in the guest room, I said, pulling a folder from my laptop bag. We need to talk. Gabe's eyes fixed on the folder in my hands, the legal-looking manila envelope that contained his future. Caroline, what is this? Sit down, I said, gesturing to the kitchen table where we had shared 5 years of meals, conversations, and lies. He sat slowly, as if his bones had turned to glass. I opened the folder and spread the contents across the table with deliberate precision. The divorce papers crisp and official. The forensic accounting report Catherine's team had prepared 23 pages, detailing every financial transgression. Bank statements with highlighted withdrawals. The insurance policy documentation, the quitclaim deed, a full catalog of betrayal documented in black and white. Gabe's face transformed as he processed what was in front of him. First came confusion, his brow furrowing as he tried to make sense of the papers. Then shock, his mouth falling slightly open as he recognized the insurance documents. Anger flashed next, his jaw tightening as he saw the bank statements. Finally, as the full scope of his exposure became clear, his expression crumbled into something pathetic and pleading. Where did you get this? His voice was barely a whisper. From your filing cabinet, the one you thought I didn't have a key to. I sat across from him, maintaining the same calm I had displayed since Tuesday night. The divorce papers are new, of course. My lawyer had them drawn up this morning. Your lawyer? He looked up sharply. You've already seen a lawyer. You moved in with another woman, Gabe. What did you expect me to do? Wait patiently for you to come back. His hands were shaking as he picked up the forensic accounting report. This says I embezzled $35,000. $37,467, to be precise. Over 2 years. Insurance premiums for a policy on Chloe. Property consultation fees that mysteriously coincided with her deed transfer. Various other expenses that had nothing to do with our marriage, but everything to do with your plans with her. The house, he said suddenly, looking around our kitchen as if seeing it for the first time. This is our house. No, Gabe. This is my house. Purchased before our marriage, with my grandmother's inheritance. You never contributed to the mortgage payments that came out of my personal account, not our joint finances. You are now a tenant here, and you have 30 days to find alternative accommodations. The color drained completely from his face. You can't do this. I can, and I am. The joint accounts have been frozen pending asset division. Though given the forensic accounting, my lawyer feels the court will be very interested in your financial misconduct. Community property fraud, she called it. Gabe stood abruptly the chair, scraping against the floor. You planned this. You knew about Chloe's surgery, about everything. I knew what you chose to show me, I said calmly. Your laptop was open. Your emails were right there. You left your filing cabinet unlocked. You made it remarkably easy to understand exactly what you and Chloe were planning. The documents, he said, realization dawning with a horrifying clarity. The ones Chloe found in her mailbox. That was you. I tilted my head slightly. I simply made sure that all parties involved had all the necessary information to make informed decisions. Isn't that what you claimed you were doing? Making the mature, informed decision to help someone in need? You've destroyed everything, Gabe said, his voice rising. You turned Chloe against me. I didn't turn anyone against you. I just made sure Chloe knew about the life insurance policy you took out in her name, the one worth $500,000 with you as the sole beneficiary. Any reasonable person would find that concerning, don't you think? Especially combined with the property deed transfer. Gabe's phone buzzed on the table. He picked it up and I watched his face go even paler as he read. He turned the screen toward me. Chloe's Facebook post was already gaining traction, posted just minutes ago. Warning to all women, it began in all caps. Gabe Sullivan is a con artist who tried to take my house and took out a life insurance policy in my name without my knowledge. He used his wife's money to pay for it while planning to leave her. Proof attached. Below were pictures of every document from the envelope I had left in her mailbox. The insurance policy, the property deed, even screenshots of their emails discussing their plan. The comments were already piling up, our mutual friends expressing shock, anger, disbelief. My reputation, Gabe whispered, scrolling through the growing firestorm of comments. My career. Everyone will see this. Yes, I agreed. They will. His phone rang. His brother's name flashed on the screen. Then it rang again, his mother, a colleague. The flood had begun. You did this, he said, but there was no fight left in his voice, only a hollow recognition. You orchestrated all of it. The packing, the drive over the documents. You knew exactly what would happen. I knew Chloe deserved to know what kind of man was moving into her home. I knew you deserved to face the consequences of your choices. And I knew that I deserved better than a husband who spent 2 years planning his exit while he slept beside me every night. Gabe sank back into the chair, his phone continuing to vibrate with incoming calls and texts, the life he had carefully constructed, the reputation he had cultivated, the elaborate plan he had hatched with Chloe. It was all unraveling in real time, documented for public consumption on social media. The guest room has clean sheets, I said, gathering the legal documents back into their folder. Your belongings are in the closet in there. You have 30 days, Gabe. I suggest you start looking for an apartment tomorrow. I stood to leave, but his voice stopped me at the doorway. How long did you know? Know what? That you were leaving since Tuesday night. That you were a liar. Maybe I always knew. I just chose to believe in something better. I never wanted it to happen like this, he said to my back. I didn't turn around. No. You wanted it to happen without me ever finding out. With you having both Chloe's property and my financial support. With you getting everything while I got nothing but an empty house and confusion. This version, where you're exposed for who you really are, You're right. You never wanted that to happen. I went upstairs to my bedroom, now mine and mine alone, and closed the door on Gabe's muffled phone conversation with what sounded like his brother. The panicked tone of his voice filtered up through the floor as I changed into comfortable clothes and put my hair up. This was my house, my space, my life to reclaim. 2 weeks passed in a blur of legal meetings and rerouted mail. The neighborhood gossip network, more efficient than any news service, kept me informed without my having to ask. Megan learned from her colleague who lived on Rosewood Lane that Chloe had filed for a restraining order against Gabe. The property deed transfer had been flagged as potentially fraudulent, and she was pursuing legal action. Mrs. Jenkins, walking buddy past my house daily, now mentioned she'd heard Gabe had moved into a studio apartment near the highway, the kind of place that advertises affordable weekly rates on faded billboards. My mother arrived on a Saturday morning, 3 weeks after Gabe's departure, carrying a pot of her famous chicken noodle soup and the determined expression of a woman on a mission. She let herself in with her spare key, found me reading in the living room, and set the soup on the kitchen counter without a word. "You're too thin," she said, her standard greeting, regardless of my actual appearance. "I'm eating just fine, Mom." She heated the soup while I set the table. Our movements synchronized from years of practice. We ate in comfortable silence for several minutes before she spoke again. "Your father wasn't my first husband." I nearly dropped my spoon. In 32 years, she had never mentioned this. "His name was Ricardo," she continued, stirring her soup with careful precision. "Charming, ambitious, everything a young woman thinks she wants. We were married for 3 years before I found out he'd been using my trust fund to finance his mistress's boutique. He'd convinced me to put his name on everything. Said it was what married couples did. Mom, I had no idea. I was 25 and thought I knew everything about love." She looked at me, and I saw my recent experience mirrored in her eyes. The morning I found out I wanted to burn his clothes on the front lawn, scream at him in front of his colleagues, make sure everyone knew what kind of man he was. "What did you do?" I documented everything. Quietly, carefully. Then I served him with divorce papers at the grand opening of his mistress's boutique in front of all of his investors. A small smile played on her lips. The boutique closed in 6 months. Ricardo moved to another state and became a used car salesman. Last I heard, he was on his 3rd marriage. And Dad, I met your father 2 years later. By then, I knew the difference between charm and character. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "The best revenge is living well while they live with their choices." "Caroline, you're already doing that." The validation I didn't know I needed washed over me. My mother, the woman who taught me how to fold a fitted sheet and never leave the house without lipstick, understood exactly what I had done and why. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text from Sophia, Chloe's sister from Laura's book club. "Chloe wants you to know something. Can I give her your number?" I considered it for a moment before typing back. "Can she email me?" The message arrived that evening, sent from a new subjectless email address. "Caroline, I won't insult you with apologies or excuses. We both know what I did and what I intended to do, but you saved me from something potentially dangerous. The insurance policy, the property deed, my lawyer says it could have been catastrophic if I'd let him stay. I posted everything online, not for the drama but to warn others. Gabe Sullivan is a predator in a nice guy mask. Thank you for taking that mask off. I'm moving to Lisbon next month. A fresh start. Chloe." I read it twice before deleting it. No response was needed. Chloe and I weren't about to become friends, bonded by Gabe's betrayal. We were just 2 women who had learned an expensive lesson about the difference between what men say and what they do. The leaves turned autumnal colors as my life settled into new rhythms. Gabe's 30 days came and went, his remaining belongings collected while I was deliberately at work. He left his key on the kitchen counter. No note. Just the metallic acknowledgement that this chapter was closed. 6 months after that Tuesday night revelation, I hosted my first dinner party in the house that was now entirely mine. Megan brought her new boyfriend, a pediatrician who laughed at her jokes and looked at her like she was the 8th wonder of the world. Laura came with her husband and a bottle of wine, expensive enough to prove she was celebrating my freedom. Even Mrs. Jenkins was invited, delighting everyone with neighborhood gossip while pretending she hadn't been my spy network during the dark days. The house felt different, now lighter. I had repainted the walls in colors Gabe had called too bold hung art he deemed too modern, and turned his office into a reading room with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. Every corner reflected my choices, my taste, my life. "A toast," Megan announced, raising her glass as we gathered in the living room after dinner. to Caroline, who showed us all that sometimes the best response to betrayal isn't revenge, it's revelation. We clinked glasses, the sound crystalline in my peaceful home. Through the window, I could see the city lights spread out in the distance, each one representing someone living their own story, facing their own betrayals and triumphs. Somewhere in that city, Gabe was learning that a reputation once shattered can't be rebuilt with explanations or excuses. His LinkedIn profile had gone dormant after too many people shared Chloe's warning post. The marketing firm where he'd worked had quietly suggested he seek opportunities elsewhere. Chloe had indeed moved to Lisbon, leaving behind a townhouse that no longer held either profit or promise for Gabe's schemes. I stood in my kitchen after everyone had left, washing the wine glasses by hand, finding comfort in the simple ritual. The house was quiet but not empty. It was filled with the echoes of genuine laughter, real friendship, and the knowledge that I had chosen the truth over comfortable lies. The manila envelope that had started Gabe's downfall was long gone, but its impact remained not in bitterness or anger, but in the clean, sharp clarity of a life reclaimed. I had learned that sometimes the most devastating weapon isn't rage or revenge. It's simply making sure everyone sees the truth.